personally, it's like a release techno. I think for me, I think you go out at nights out and you can just get lost in something. I get lost in techno all the time. I don't realise I'm sitting listening to music, and hours have gone by and I've just been sitting listening to tunes constant. But it's escapism. There's a rebellious side of techno as well, because it's quite aggressive music. A lot of people, when you play, even some of the lighter stuff that I like, they're just like, whoa, that's it's still quite banging. It's quite different for some people to hear. There's the subculture aspect of it as well, and there is a lifestyle involved in it as well. I focus solely on listening to techno.
Techno, I think, has developed and become different things, but if you're looking at what is original techno, I think the idea of Miles Davis and Kraftwerk and The Lift kind of sums it up kind of quite well. Techno involves, for me, playing the black notes of the keyboard, the minor seventh chords. It was jazzy, it was funky, it was very electronic, and soulful, if you can get soul out of drum machines.
Techno is, I think someone once said, music for machines, made by machines.
Techno is the hard, pulsating dance music of the 80s and 90s. It's industrial, it's hardcore, and it comes from the most creative African-American city in the world, the city of Detroit.
People categorise music quite a lot, and I just did there, but for me, anything that makes me move is techno to me.
To me, techno is lots of different kinds of good music, maybe electronic music. It's all, to me, it's like techno, but to certain people, maybe techno is from Detroit.
It's a whole mindset, I think. It's not just the music, it's the kind of futurism and art.
In many respects, there are some key similarities between Detroit and Glasgow, not least the love of techno music. But perhaps the greatest single thing that they share is deindustrialisation. These are two cities that in the 30s, 40s and even into the 50s were synonymous with heavy industry. In the case of Detroit, with the car manufacturing, with the foundries, with steel manufacturing, and in the case of Glasgow, with shipbuilding and also with steel manufacturing. So these two cities were famous around the world for making things, for manufacturing and particularly heavy industry. But of course, around the same time, they were both blighted by a crisis of industrial production and what they call the deindustrialisation of those cities. Lots of people losing their jobs, lots of parts of the city falling into disrepair, an awful lot of areas of the city, old factories, old warehouses, old distribution centres lying empty and being taken over by rubble and whatever. And in lots of ways, that sense of them being deindustrialised places made them, to some extent, perfect for the sound of techno. One other reason why you might say that Glasgow had this love affair with Detroit, they're both working class cities, but a really important thing is people and places. Now, when the sub club in Glasgow first opened, it was a place that was almost a home to international travelling DJs coming from hip-hop, from house music in Chicago, and from the Detroit techno scene. And it remained very, very faithful to that music throughout the whole of the 90s and into the millennial years and whatever. And in lots of ways, were it not for the sub-club and for other clubs that grew up from it, Optimo and all other places that emerged as a consequence of this love affair with the music of Detroit, has remained a kind of a thread that's run through the history of Glasgow and its club culture.
It became, you know, an attitude. I mean, I loved Trexia, for example, and Underground Resistance, and their quite militant political stance, because it felt to me that the music, as well as being something that, of course, there was a lot of hedonism around, but still, you know, at the parties after the clubs and stuff like that, there was a lot of talking that went on about art and culture, and that's what actually interested me more than just the hedonism.
I think that Glasgow has sort of picked up on the Detroit sound from years ago. You know, the guys that sort of started Rubber Dub were sort of really, really into the Detroit sound, and they were a lot of the first guys to sort of bring the producers and stuff over and to play in Glasgow. So they made that connection, I think, musically with Detroit and the people that were coming out there as well. And then there was obviously they were obviously like-minded in that way, that connection still exists and has evolved.
Detroit being a hard city, a lot harder than Glasgow, I hasten to add. Glasgow's a post-industrial city, but really probably compared to Detroit is probably a bit of a cushy number. You know, your post areas, but there is that landscape for techno.
Detroit and Glasgow have also similarly actually began to build a post-industrial cultural economy. They're both cities where artists have got kind of a strong position, where there's lots of new industries, where there's a lot of creative industries, where there's lots of fashion industries, and of course lots of clubs. So in that sense, they suffered at the same time, but they're regenerating at the same time as well. One other important thing that Detroit and Glasgow share is they're both just do-it cities. There's a lot of self-made culture in both of the cities. If you take Glasgow and look back over its longest history, one of the things that Glasgow's been great at is music. It's got a tradition of people setting up bands, of running club nights, of the Glasgow Art School having this kind of outreach where people set up kind of great nights that become almost kind of art events as much as they are music events. And so Glasgow's been fantastic at this idea of just indie bands growing up and gathering and being in basements and garages and just forming and doing it and evolving and mutating and whatever. Similarly in Detroit, you've got this kind of great tradition. It actually goes right back to the 1960s, where there was a whole Klondike of different kind of 4-track studios across the city. And Detroit's also a just do-it city. There's always new forms of music evolving or building up. And that's as true of the insurrectionary garage rock bands like MC5, Iggy and the Stooges, as it is the kind of soul music of, you know, the Supremes and the Four Tops and whatever, as it is of the Detroit techno scene of the 80s. What they share is this idea of local musicians and local practitioners just doing it.
I think that Detroit would influence it insofar as Detroit artists are influencing the scene and the music, and they've not stopped doing it in the last 20, 30 years. So yeah, I think it'll keep happening.